By this point, it is no secret that the Saints Row reboot was a colossal disaster. Since the first trailer, most knew that the game was headed in the wrong direction. However, the end product was far worse than most could have expected. This reboot was nothing like the original games, and the publisher would have been better off naming it something different and allowing the IP to stand on its own. While there was plenty of debate about the characters and story, there were also more minor issues. Firstly, the game was highly repetitive and broken. This, of course, is nothing new for modern games. It will be easier to point out the titles that are not broken at launch than vice versa. However, Saints Row certainly had an unusual amount of problems. If you managed to look past the bugs, you found yourself in a repetitive hellhole. Most missions were highly tedious, where you had to do the same pick-up and shoot missions all the time. Then, we have the characters for this game. They were dull and completely unoriginal. The Saints Row reboot tried to appeal to a more progressive audience, forgetting that they are usually not the people who play games. The dialogue was even worse. While I do not think that the voice acting for the game was terrible, it was clear that the actors did not know what to do with their lines. You are only as good as your script, and sadly, this script was terrible. However, we are now discovering that the issues behind the scenes were much worse than initially thought. Although that might be hard to believe, the end product is proof of that. By this point, we know how important the Saints Row reboot was for Volition. They invested almost $200 million into the game and needed it to succeed. Behind the scenes, there was a struggle to find any real identity for the IP. Initially, the plan was for the game to be a sequel. They wanted to continue the story after Saints Row 4 and return to their roots. As most know, the fourth game took a different turn. We entered the game of Supernatural, and there was a massive focus on power. While this directional shift was controversial to many, I immensely enjoyed it. It was the first game I ever played on my PC, and is still one of the best experiences ever. I also wish they could have done a remaster for the fourth game. A sequel would arguably have fared better than a complete reboot. People are used to these characters and want to see them return. While I am sure a sequel would have received some internet hate, it would not have been despised this much. The entire soul of the game was stripped away when Volition focused on a new, younger cast of skinny kids trying to pay off their student debt or something. I honestly still do not entirely know what this story was about. It is sad to say, but everyone might have been better off if they never tried to revive this franchise. Most people have positive memories of Saints Row. There was no reason to mess with it. Reports also state that Deep Silver executives heavily influenced the direction of this game. Writers originally wanted to bring the old cast back. They also wanted to return and do a game that felt more like Saints Row 2. However, higher-ups interfered in this process and stated that the game needed to be more upbeat. Volition executives directly said that the game would fail if they brought back the old cast and made the game darker. I understand why they might have felt the game should be more upbeat. Saints Row is known for its comedy. While there are some darker undertones, the game is usually more upbeat. Thus, Deep Silver executives might have felt that writers were going in the wrong direction with a darker theme. However, this confused the entire team, who struggled with the game's focus. The result was a massive amount of developers leaving the project. This mass exodus is the game in a complete disaster, and ultimately, the Saints Row reboot was born. To appeal to a specific audience, they lost the game's soul, and we ended up with the current disaster. The reason why the game was filled with so many bugs is also a direct result of many people leaving the project. The latest iteration went from a sequel to a reboot in a short period. It went from a game pitched as more severe to something more comedy-filled and light-hearted. This has always been the soul of Saints Row. However, the reboot was not a comedy but a joke. Those words might be harsh to say, but also true. Sadly, after this reboot disaster, we will likely never see another Saints Row game again, at least not for many years. Whatever hope there was for a remaster of the fourth game is now gone. Volition closed down permanently, which can almost directly be tied to the failure of the Saints Row reboot. Embracer Group owned this studio and is the current owner of the IP. They clearly only care about maximizing their profits and thus won't return to a title that did not generate a profit for them. The sad truth is that Saints Row can be a profit leader for them. Unfortunately, the franchise was never utilized correctly. In total, these games have sold over 30 million copies. While they are not the biggest franchise in the world, its success still speaks for itself. However, maybe it was not the best financial decision to invest $200 million into the game. It sucks that the people at Volition lost their jobs because of this situation. However, that is, unfortunately, how the world works. I do not want anyone to be without a way to support themselves, but if you do not perform and deliver, you will find yourself out of a job. Based on everything I have seen, it is clear that Volition completely missed the mark here. The decision to go with a reboot instead of a sequel was terrible. Even a remake would have been a better option. Of course, it is easy to say these things now that we know the result. Deep Silver Volition made some big mistakes, and the workers are paying the ultimate price. Many developers did not deserve to lose their jobs, and many did. There was many missed calculation made with this game. Unfortunately, no lessons can be learned from this mistake because the studio no longer exists. Whoever ends up with the Saints Row IP next hopefully listens to fans and goes back to their roots. I do fear that this will likely not happen.